good to know you're watching. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to World News. Now, President Barack Obama of the U.S. and Vice President Joe Biden attended a prayer service at Washington's National Cathedral on Tuesday, a tradition on the day after the inauguration. While the service had a distinctly interfaith flavor, few Christian conservatives attended.
There was a performance by an African-American gospel choir. And a muezzin's call to prayer. The president sat quietly in the front row as the service featured a diversity of religions. Episcopal Bishop Catherine Jeffords Shorey offered a prayer.
Make us who come from many nations with many different languages a united people.
But outside the historic cathedral, still being repaired from the 2011 earthquake, the message of harmony was not felt.
For black, white, and brown, rich and poor, who were aborted.
Kristen Hawkins and fellow activists marked the 40th anniversary of a Supreme Court ruling legalizing abortion.
40 years of walking in the darkness. We cannot be silent today. It doesn't matter what's going on today.
A prayer breakfast on Monday drew a large crowd of conservative Christians.
There are three things that are really very major. Number one is life, number two is Israel, and number three is judges.
Ann Baconfuso believes the president is pro-abortion and anti-Israel, and she worries about who he might appoint to the Supreme Court because she believes he doesn't share her faith.
He is not a Christian. I believe that he is not a Christian.
Others do believe it, but while diversity was also on display at this gathering, the prayers here were aimed at giving conservatives the faith to stand up to what they expect will be a liberal agenda in the president's second term.
Now to Mexico. For more than 48 hours, armed men held the entire town of Marcos Castellanos hostage, killing 2 people and kidnapping a police officer. After the attack, most of the police force resigned. Poorly paid police throughout the country are often victims of the violence they themselves try to battle.
In central Mexico, even a simple road is a battleground. Recently, armed men held this entire town hostage for 48 hours. When the siege ended, 2 were dead, and 1 police officer had been kidnapped. A message to others in law enforcement that they could be next. After the attack, most of the police force resigned, including Ramon, who's been patrolling these streets for more than a decade. Outgunned and outmanned, Ramon says he no longer felt his badge and gun gave him the authority he needed to enforce the law.
We're easy targets for these heartless criminals who don't care about anyone, least of all us, who are the only ones capable of confronting them.
Poorly paid local police throughout the country are often victims of the violence they themselves try to battle. Lack of training and equipment means they are no match for criminal gangs, who they sometimes go and work for. The mayor says his town is like many in Mexico, caught up in drug violence.
We feel totally helpless, and at times I think, what is the solution? To arm everyone so we can defend ourselves?
Vigilante justice is fast becoming the norm in Mexico. Citizens by the hundreds, aware that the police can't stop the criminals, are arming themselves. Just a few hours away in Oripicho, men from the village set up an armed checkpoint after the discovery of a corpse of a well-known drug lord that was dumped in the nearby mountains.
We decided to do this because we needed to protect ourselves. If we don't, who will?
Back in Marcos Castellanos, Ramon investigates a break-in. He says he's happy to be back at work, but doesn't know for how much longer.
If my family, my children, or my wife are ever threatened, then that would be my limit.
For the police in Mexico, protecting citizens first means surviving themselves.
As Syrian refugees stream into Lebanon, tensions between Lebanese and Syrians are growing daily. Strains of space and resources are heightened by historic frictions. Young people especially feel the tension, and one effort called Youth Initiatives is bringing students together in an effort to minimize prejudice and build friendships.
On a chilly Sunday in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, Lebanese and Syrian children are busily making puppets. Sitting side by side, they draw, cut, and refine their creations, hoping the glue is not the only thing that sticks. Despite a history of tensions between their two countries, these students are learning to respect each other through a program called Rainbow of Hope. The program provides leadership and conflict resolution skills through extracurricular activities. Idal Khalid is the director of the program. He says the Syrian army's former presence in Lebanon is one reason for the tensions, but there are others.
The Lebanese media is playing a negative role by making Lebanese scared of the Syrian refugees. The media, too, are also imposing some ideas that the Lebanese are of a higher class. In addition, most of the refugees are really poor, so their lifestyles are different from Lebanese.
Rainbow of Hope started 3 months ago and is funded by the U.S. government. Once a week, students convene for activities such as basketball, puppet shows, plays, films, and cultural excursions. Sometimes the differences can be as basic as language, says Syrian student Rama Salib.
I didn't understand them because they speak Lebanese dialect.
But since the program started, Khalid says he's already seeing better relations between the students. Lebanese student Asma Harouk.
When the Syrians first came, I didn't know them. I didn't interact with them. Now I feel like there's a friendship between us because of these activities.
With war in Syria raging just over these hills, it's hard not to think about the hardships some of the children have been through, says one of the teachers, Lilian Hamse.
We are trying our best to make them equal, but sometimes you find yourself that you are feeling with Syria much more because of what he faced before.
While refugees from Syria's war receive food, housing, and blankets, few programs address their psychological and social needs.
Over to Thailand, where a Thai magazine editor, Samyot Pruksaka Samsuk, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for 2 articles he wrote back in the year 2010. Judges decided the articles violated Thailand's last Majest laws, which make it illegal for anyone to criticize the monarchy.
He arrived at court, Somyot Pruksaka Samsuk was confident. He's been in jail since he was arrested in April 2011, having been denied bail 12 times. But shackled at the ankles alongside other prisoners also facing criminal charges, he hoped this was the day his already long campaign for freedom would end. He said he was innocent and not a criminal. But he also knew that being charged with insulting the monarchy in Thailand usually results in a long jail term. And that's exactly what was handed down at the criminal court in Bangkok. Somyot was given 10 years for publishing articles in his magazine deemed offensive to the monarchy, and an additional year for a separate defamation case. Somyot didn't write the articles, and his legal team pinned its case on the Printing Act, which protects editors from court action based on what others write. But when it comes to insulting the monarchy, few policemen or judges are willing to throw cases out for fear they too may be accused of being disloyal.
This is a problem for Thailand, as Somyot's verdict is a clear example of the lack of human rights. Since the beginning of the case, he was detained.
The European Union issued a statement saying the verdict undermines the right to freedom of expression and press freedom. It went on to say that it affects Thailand's image as a free and democratic society. Somyot's supporters gathered outside the court. Some believe he was targeted for prosecution because he also campaigned for a change in the law, something his family says he'll continue to do.
I think mentally he's going to continue fighting for freedom of expression or freedom of, saying, publishing something, because he's the journalist. So this is the most important.
There are no plans at this stage to ask for a royal pardon because Somyot says he's innocent. There will be an appeal, but for now another person is preparing to spend many years in jail under Thailand's strict lèse majesté laws.
Now, a man who has turned his home on the island of Bali into a museum for others to view his collection of masks hopes his collection will allow others to better understand Indonesian culture. Agustinus Prayitno has spent the most part of his life collecting masks from both Indonesia and other areas from around the world.
My name is Agustinus Prayitno. I'm 67 years old. I spent my life collecting masks from Indonesia and from around the world. I started collecting masks in 1998. I'm doing this because I'm concerned so many masks made by our ancestors have disappeared. It's made me restless. This mask has a high value. Masks that show expressions such as anger or happiness are worth more. We have 3 goals. The first is to conserve, the second is to educate, and the last is to entertain. I've traveled far and wide to collect these masks. I do a lot of networking and try to develop good relationships with mask makers in order to discover the best masks. Mask dancing has 2 purposes, especially in Bali. The first is for religious rituals. The second is to entertain. I've more than 1,350 masks. The most memorable is from Kalimantan. This mask was difficult to get. The forest in Kalimantan has been destroyed by the mining and logging industries. There are no more indigenous masks from Kalimantan. They're all gone. I'm so sad. The tribe is gone. Even the birds are gone. It is very ironic.
Now, in the United Kingdom, British Prime Minister David Cameron is to give a speech that is expected to question whether the UK should stay as a member of the European Union. The speech has been scheduled for last Friday in the Netherlands, but was postponed because of the Algerian hostage crisis.
This is the port of Dover, the historic front line in Britain's defences. The famous White Cliffs are a national symbol of the defeat of Germany in World War II. From the gun emplacements, you get a good view of France, and that's quite as close as many want to be to Europe. Why, people ask, do the French let so many illegal immigrants through to come here, while the European justice system won't let us deport terrorists? Why does Brussels insist on a limit to the number of hours people should work, which stifles economic growth? Why, they say, is what we want to do here any of their business at all? That, after all, isn't very democratic.
We're not really interested in fiscal or financial integration to the European systems. We want to keep our own identity, our own currency, and we're really we have a cultural identity of our own, a national identity, and I don't think we want to see European judgments imposed upon what we do.
So does Europe stifle economic growth? Well, no, says this local factory boss, where they have held remarkably steady through the Eurozone crisis.
For reasons of stability and volatility, or lack of volatility and consistency, we think that whatever the downside of regulation from Europe and pressure on our profits, it's better to be in Europe.
And the alternative of falling out?
Correct. The idea of falling out brings instability and all sorts of potential problems.
And the unions argue that a British exit from the EU would dismantle the rights of millions of British workers.
We've seen minimum wage, we've seen holidays, we've seen discrimination rights, we've seen quite literally everything that workers have got over the last 10 years has come from Europe directives.
Still, the government's argument of a Britain proud and independent, answerable to nobody, is powerful. But just as they are tired of Europe, many on the continent are tired of Britain complaining. Either way round, Britain's route out of the European Union may be getting closer.
Well, that's what we put together for you on World News today. Remember to go to our website, log on to www.afriquemedia.tv. You'll get all our news. Bye for now and do take care of yourselves.